Are you ready for a ghost story? You are listening to Death Kiss Traveler, the podcast that explores horror, hauntings, and history at amusement parks. My name is Marissa, your morbidly curious host, and today's episode steps us back into history and leads us to modern hauntings. Thank you for joining me. Please hit that subscribe button, and if you love this podcast, please give me a 5-star review wherever you are listening. Join me on TikTok and Instagram at Death Kiss Traveler Podcast to see photos and discuss these stories. I really appreciate the support. This podcast is growing each week and it's being listened to all around the world. I can't thank my listeners enough. Now let's dive into our story. Long before the laughter of roller coasters and the shimmer of neon lights, there was a quiet place at the edge of the Ohio frontier, a small patch of land that would become known as Dog Street Cemetery. Established in 1803, it was one of the first resting places for the pioneers who had braved the Ohio wilderness. Families who settled here faced relentless hardship. Winters were bitter, crops often failed, and disease claimed more lives than anyone cared to count. Entire families were buried side by side, fathers and mothers, children who never saw their 5th birthday, elders who had survived decades of toil. Each weathered headstone tells a story of survival, loss, and the quiet determination of those who built a life from the unforgiving Ohio soil. The cemetery had largely been neglected since 1890. The old burial ground sat abandoned on private property, tucked out of public view. The nearby town of Kings Mills had long let upkeep fall by the wayside, leaving the graves overgrown and nearly invisible. Time has taken its toll on many of the gravestones. Weather and decades of neglect have worn away most of the inscriptions, though a few markers still remain, standing as silent witnesses to the past. According to the local historical society, the earliest recorded burial dates back to 1803, while the last burial occurred in 1869. Among the cemetery's historic residents, one stands out. Peter Montfort, believed to have been a Revolutionary War veteran who served in the Brinkerhoff's Regiment of the New York Militia. He passed away in 1823, and his grave remains a notable reminder of the generations who shaped early Ohio, their lives now etched in weathered stone. Now let's fast forward to the late 1960s, and the roaring farmland of Mason, Ohio stretched as far as the eye could see. Farmers tend to their fields, unaware that soon their quiet land would be transformed into something extraordinary. The Taft Broadcasting Company had a vision, a park unlike anything in the Midwest, a place where thrill of rides and the wonder of themed worlds could coexist. They called it Kings Island. Kings Island Amusement Park is located in Mason, Ohio, about 24 miles northeast of Cincinnati. Groundbreaking began amid the chirping birds and the hum of machinery. Bulldozers tore through the soil, leveling the gentle hills and clearing the land for the foundations of rides that would make visitors' hearts race. Engineers and architects scoured every inch, carefully plotting where roller coasters would twist, where paths would curve, and where fountains and flower beds would welcome families. Lewis H. Woolsey faced a colossal problem. As a project manager, he was tasked with transforming 80 acres of farmland into the massive Kings Island parking lot, which meant moving about 35,000 dump truck loads of dirt. But standing in his way was a hidden obstacle, a long-forgotten cemetery. Before any excavation could begin, Woolsey's team had to relocate and protect it, and the clock was ticking. Finding it was like searching for a needle in a haystack. Woolsey's crew had a rough idea of where it might be, and after hours of combing the land by foot and in vehicles, they finally stumbled upon a clue. Remnants of an old barbed wire fence faintly enclosed a small area. Inside, foot-high myrtle, waist-high weeds, and dense trees made it nearly impossible to see the ground. But then, amid the tangled greenery, a worker spotted it, a single tombstone, standing stubbornly against time. The cemetery had been found. Woolsey told the Cincinnati Enquirer in October of 1970, Woolsey told the Cincinnati Enquirer, "We always knew it was there." They surveyed the site, and he noted that of the 69 graves, only 1 or 2 stones still stood. Quote, "About the only way you could locate some of the stones was to step on them." End quote. A testament to how completely the cemetery had been swallowed by nature over the decades. Dog Street Cemetery is more than a resting place. It is a portal to another time, where the lives, joys, and sorrows of Ohio's earliest settlers whisper through the centuries. Dog Street Cemetery sat at the north edge of the site. The planners preserved it, leaving it untouched, as though paying homage to the pioneers who once settled the land. Workers whispered about the eerie feeling of digging just a few feet from the graves, yet the construction pressed on, blending past and future in a strange combination. During construction, every day brought new challenges. Heavy rains turned the freshly cleared fields into mud pits. Deliveries of steel for roller coaster tracks arrived behind schedule. Designers argued over details, how steep the drop should be, how wide a curve, or how tall a tower. Decisions that would determine whether Kings Island would thrill or terrify its visitors. Legend has it that during construction of the Kings Island parking lot, one grave may have been accidentally paved over, disturbing the spirit of a little girl known as Missouri Jane. Records from the cemetery leave room for this possibility, especially since an estimated 17 gravestones have disappeared since the 1980s. At one point, Missouri Jane's marker was found lying flat on the ground, later propped against another stone, before eventually being reset into the earth. With no surviving photographs or drawings from 1846 to confirm the original placement of the markers, no one can say for certain if her headstone stands in the correct spot today. When Kings Island opened its gates in 1972, it was celebrated as a shining example of modern family entertainment. Roller coasters, live shows, and bright lights replacing the sleepy farmland that had been there for generations. But beneath the laughter and excitement lingered something older. The land that had held the Dog Street Cemetery, with its forgotten pioneers, children, and even a Revolutionary War veteran, had not been abandoned. It had simply been built around. Almost immediately, whispers began to spread among employees and guests. Strange shadows in the parking lot near the cemetery. Footsteps echoing through quiet corners of the parking lot long after closing. And most famously, the sight of a little girl in a blue dress, said to be Missouri Jane herself, roaming the edges of the park as if searching for her misplaced grave. Over the years, King Island has gained a reputation not only for its record-breaking rides, but for also as one of the most haunted amusement parks in America. From unexplained figures in photographs to full-bodied apparitions spotted on rides, the park's ghost stories have become almost as legendary as its roller coasters. And despite popular belief, not every ghost story at Kings Island is tied to the old cemetery beneath its soil. For decades, whispers of fatal accidents have circulated through the park, and while many are exaggerated, several tragic deaths are well documented. These real-life losses may explain why Kings Island carries such a chilling reputation for the supernatural. Behind the laughter and flashing lights are stories of tragedy, Moments where fun turned fatal. One of the earliest came in 1976, when a young park ranger in the Lion Country Safari exhibit stepped out of his vehicle and was mauled by a lion. Just 7 years after its opening, Kings Island had its first death. Then in 1983, a 17-year-old boy celebrating his graduation party climbed into the restricted area of the Eiffel Tower replica, slipped, and plummeted to his death down the elevator shaft. But nothing compares to what locals still call Black Sunday. On June 9, 1991, tragedy struck twice within hours. First, 2 men, including a park security guard, were electrocuted when they rushed to help another guest who had fallen into the pond, electrified by a hidden wire. Later that same day, just across the park, a 32-year-old woman named Candy Taylor was thrown nearly 60 feet from the flight commander ride. Witnesses could only scream as her seat released mid-flight and she fell to her death before their eyes. By the end of that night, 3 lives had been lost. It was the darkest day in Kings Island's history. The park tragedies didn't end there. In 2009, a man collapsed and died shortly after riding Firehawk, later determined to be the result of a heart condition. And most recently, in 2024, 38-year-old Arntanaro Nelson was struck by the Banshee roller coaster after stepping into a restricted area to retrieve his keys. He survived for 2 days before succumbing to his injuries. In total, 7 lives have been lost at Kings Island. Some to accidents, some to risk, some simply to fate. But every time you walk through the gates, these stories linger in the air. Reminders that even in a place built for joy, death has left its mark. Long after the guests leave Kings Island for the night, when the midway grows quiet and the coaster stands still against the Ohio sky, some say one ride refuses to sleep peacefully: the Racer. Over the years, employees have reported the unsettling sight of a small boy dressed completely in white, wandering too close to the towering wooden coaster. His presence is so lifelike that guests often mistake him for a lost child and alert security, only for him to vanish without a trace. This spectral figure has earned a chilling nickname, Racer Boy. The legend ties back decades before Kings Island even existed, to Coney Island, the park from which the Racer inherited 2 of its 4 train cars. They once belonged to the Shooting Star, a wooden roller coaster with its own tragic history, a story for another podcast. But according to old accounts, the boy was riding alone in the very back of the Shooting Star train when the ride thundered back into the station. The seat was empty. Panic ensued. A search was launched and the boy's lifeless body was discovered in a low valley of the tracks. Thrown or fallen during the ride, only to be struck and killed by the train he had boarded minutes before. Ever since the Racer opened in 1972, whispers of that death clung to the hand-me-down cars. Yet strangely, sightings of Racer Boy didn't begin until the early 1990s, decades after the ride's debut. Witnesses describe him standing silently in the tunnels, peering out from the shadows, or lingering by the wooden rails as trains roar past, as though he's waiting for something or someone to notice him. Guests who have seen him often describe him the same eerie detail. He never speaks, never runs, and never seems afraid of the roller coaster towering beside him. Instead, he simply appears, pale and small, a silent reminder of the tragedy from which he may have come. Numerous first-hand accounts from park employees and visitors lend credence to the Racer Boy legend. For those brave enough to venture near the Racer at night, the possibility of encountering Racer Boy adds an extra thrill to the ride. Whether he's a mischievous spirit or a tragic soul seeking attention, Racer Boy remains one of Kings Island's most enduring and eerie legends. The Eiffel Tower at Kings Island wasn't just a centerpiece. It was a monument to dreams and excitement. But on a quiet summer night in 1983, that dream turned to a nightmare. That night, Johnny wasn't himself. Intoxicated and tense, he'd been arguing with his girlfriend, and by all accounts from his friends, that evening wasn't going well for him. After the group rode the racer together, Johnny slipped away and vanished into the shadows, never to rejoin them. Official reports say that after leaving his friends, Johnny wandered into a restricted area, climbed the Eiffel Tower, and somehow became trapped in the elevator's counterweight. He fell roughly 200 feet, landing on top of the north elevator car and dying instantly. The details are tragic and stark, and you can find full accounts elsewhere for the official facts. But the more I dig into the story, the more questions linger. How did Johnny's wallet end up in the park's lost and found? Inside, his social security card and a graduation photo, items surely kept in his wallet, were left at the accident site. Those who knew him best, including his own brother and the people he lived with, insist he was not the type to climb the tower alone, unseen without a witness. That leads me to a theory. Maybe someone else saw what happened that night. Perhaps it was a tragic accident, or perhaps something darker occurred. Whoever had the wallet might have returned it to the lost and found to avoid suspicion, shield themselves from discovery, while leaving Johnny's fate a complete mystery. Someday I might dig deeper into this story through the lens of true crime. Until then, it lingers in the shadow of the Eiffel Tower, an unresolved puzzle haunted by both tragedy and the unknown. When Johnny was found, he was already gone, fallen down the elevator shaft in a place no one should have been. The tragedy marked the tower forever. But John didn't leave. Employees say the tower carries an unnatural chill, a cold that seeps into your bones, lingering even on the hottest summer nights. Guests have reported hearing footsteps echoing on the stairs long after the park has closed. Sometimes a shadowy figure appears at the top, pale and still, as if staring out over the park, waiting for someone to notice him. Others claim to see a young boy climbing the stairs from nowhere, only to vanish the instant you blink. Riders on the Beast have also told of sudden, unexplained chills as the train swoops past the tower's shadow. Some swear they've glimpsed a figure in white amongst the trees near the Beast. Tower Johnny, roaming the woods, still seeking a way down from the tower that took him. Why the Beast? Perhaps it's because the old elevator cables from the Eiffel Tower were stored in the woods nearby, blinding his presence to that shadowed corner of the park. Why does Johnny linger? Maybe it's because the official story of his death doesn't tell the whole truth, and he's still here, waiting for someone to finally hear his side of the story. Even the lights of the Eiffel Tower flicker without reason, and late-night maintenance crews have reported elevator doors opening on their own, only to reveal empty shafts. One employee whispered, quote, "It's like he's here, but he's not. You can feel him watching you. You can hear him pacing when there's no one around. And if you look too long, you swear he's staring right at you." End quote. Tower Johnny is more than a memory of a tragic accident. He is a presence, a shadow stitched into the very beams and stairwells of the Eiffel Tower. Another former employee recounted their encounter. Quote, "It was just after midnight. The park was closed. I heard running footsteps above me on the stairs, quick and soft. I went to check the cameras. Nothing. But I swear for a second I saw him at the top, just standing, looking, waiting, and then he vanished. End quote. Tower Johnny does not speak. He does not move toward you. He simply exists. An echo of tragedy stitched into the tower's framework. A shadow that reminds the park that even in a place built for joy, some souls never leave. Among the earliest burials in the cemetery is that of Missouri Jane Galliner, a 5-year-old girl who died in 1846. Websites claim that the girl drowned in a lake on the property and that she's buried in the cemetery. Queen City paranormal investigators call the ghost girl Missouri Jane, and her story begins like so many others. A young child lost far too early to disease or accident, buried in a small plot among other pioneers of the region. But in death, her story refuses to remain quiet. Visitors and employees have reported seeing her wandering near the cemetery and the parking lot, always wearing a blue dress, the kind children wore in the mid-1800s. She is rarely threatening. Instead, her presence is often described as sad but playful, as if she's replaying a childhood stolen too soon. Guests have even reported hearing faint laughter echoing in the night, light and distant, like the giggles of a child at play. But no one's in sight. Some of the most chilling reports come from the tram operators and the night staff who have seen a small girl step in front of the moving trams, only to vanish before they can reach her. Others claim to catch glimpses of her darting between shadows near the Dog Street Cemetery, sometimes standing silently among the old gravestones as if guarding them. The legend of Missouri Jane is intertwined with tragedy on the park grounds. Remember, her headstone was most likely disturbed during construction, and many believe that this disturbance angered or unsettled her spirit, causing her to linger near the park's edge. Despite her ghostly presence, Missouri Jane is not considered dangerous. She's described as watchful, curious, and playful, a young girl trapped between centuries. One visitor recalled, quote, "I was walking through the parking lot late at night, and I saw a little girl in a blue dress, standing by the old fence near the cemetery. I waved. She just smiled and ran off. I swear it wasn't anyone I could see. It felt different." End quote. Missouri Jane remains one of Kings Island's most enduring spirits, a bridge between the park's cheerful surface and the shadow of its past. Her story blends history with tragedy and the supernatural, giving Kings Island its most famous and innocent ghost. As the sun sets over Kings Island and the laughter fades into echoes, the park reveals another side, one not printed on maps or safety guides, but whispered among those who work late, wander empty paths, or ride in the stillness after dark. At the northern edge, near the forgotten cemetery, a little girl in a blue dress wanders among the shadows. Missouri Jane, lost centuries ago, drifts along the edge of the parking lot and tram lines. Her soft laughter carries on in the wind. Near the old wooden coaster, the racer, a pale boy dressed in white, lingers in the tunnels and along the tracks. Racer Boy, tied to a tragedy from Coney Island long before the ride arrived at Kings Island, waits silently. He stands in the shadows, appearing to guests and employees alike. High above on the Eiffel Tower, the air grows colder as you climb. Footsteps sound on empty stairs, lights flicker at the top, and the silhouette of a young man appears. Tower Johnny, lost to a fatal fall decades ago, watches the park below. His presence stretches beyond the tower, sometimes chilling riders on the beast, or wandering near the woods, reminding all that the tragedy leaves its mark in more than memory. 3 spirits, 3 tragedies, bound to Kings Island, not to scare without reason, but to linger as whispers of history, accidents, and lives interrupted. The laughter, the thrills, the joys of the park exist above them, but in quiet corners, darkened tunnels, and empty streets, the past moves unseen. Thank you for joining me on another episode of Death-Kissed Traveler. Do you believe in ghosts? Do you believe in the restless spirits of Missouri Jane, Racer Boy, and Tower Johnny? I do, and I refuse to let their stories fade. Tune in next week when I uncover a forgotten Disney park. This podcast is produced by Sun-Kissed Traveler. Sun-Kissed Traveler can take the stress out of planning a vacation.